Oh hey, and welcome back. Going through the Skills 1.1 module, our question on our Module 1, looking into the skill builder, and last time we made citations, and now we're going to go to the next level down, which is how to historically think. So I'm going to pull you back over to my screen over here and shrink myself down. So what we covered last time is that we looked into the targeted skills and practice for module 1.1, the history of the trebuchet. And now we're gathering and interrogating information from the internet. And the historical thinking is the interrogation of that internet, of that information. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull in this Word document that everybody should have a copy of. And last time we took a look at the how to cite a academic journal and how to cite a website. And this time we're going to come down to historically think. I preloaded all this stuff in here this morning because, well, I'm a history teacher, and just like an English teacher likes to read books, I actually do enjoy the study and interpretation of history. It's fun to me. So I put my name in here, and I put my name in here again because I reviewed my own work. For the title of the document and description, I just copied and pasted the building of the medieval trebuchet. And then I gave it an outline. I said, this is a University of Utah student's attempt to basically build a counterweight. Make that a little bigger for you. Build a counterweight trebuchet, just to shed some light on some of the design, logistical, and technical building challenges that were faced in the Middle Ages. And so the first question was, content and sourcing. What can we say about this document as a historical document? Now you can bring it up in the website, in the browser, but I brought it up in Adobe Reader so I could highlight some things. So for the content and sourcing, I went through and I tried to identify the author's point of view here. And a lot of times that'll come up in the abstract or the big part at the very beginning, just to try to get a sense of what they think and how they think. And I found these sentences down here to be very illuminating. It says the information gleaned from the sources can be used in conjunction with methods of traditional woodworking and experimental history to reproduce the machine. So the author's belief is that you can know more about history, not from just being there, but by using the sources and attempting to recreate the past. And as I said in the very beginning, it looked like they were more or less trying to figure out how in the Middle Ages things were being taken care of. So finding little nuggets like this in somebody's paper tells you how they think, what their beliefs are. And then the next part down, it says basically his thesis, which is, I argue that a master engineer would design an engine with geometry and experience, and that something so large can be assembled with traditional hoisting equipment that dates back to ancient times. And so for this part, it just exposes his belief and his conclusions, really. And so that all factors into our content and sourcing of identifying the author's point of view. To be fair, I could have gone a lot more into this. I could have said he's a graduate student in a Western society. This might have looked very different had he not been in the University of Utah, had he been in a different part of the world, and had he been in a different time period as well. For the intended audience, it's important here that for the intended audience, you really think about this through the perspective of who was doing the writing and why they were doing it. I would anticipate, based on the fact that this is a capstone project for a undergraduate in historical studies, that this is mainly for their professor. And then secondary to that would be anybody who is going to approve the degree. And above that There would be anybody who might accept this student into a master's program or a PhD program or give this person a job. And then truthfully, at the heart of things, every historian wants to contribute to the overall historical knowledge. And so when it comes to the intended audience, I basically just wrapped it all up in this. Now, place the writing in historical context. And this is an important one because this is the writing in historical context. We're not talking about the trebuchet when it was used. We're talking about this project being done in 2019. And it wasn't done professionally. It wasn't done by professional historians pushing this forward. It was done to kind of show that this student had learned all the things they needed to learn in order to be a very next level historian. And so this is the skills that culminated in the degree, and the sourcing, and I put this in here, the sourcing techniques and conclusions are based on more recent academic historical study. So it's important to consider when it was done and what the historiography would look like from that perspective. So down to the contextualization, and this starts to get into more or less the broad context of the historical event. We know that this was done in 2019. We know that this was done, on a different continent, in a different culture, in a language that wasn't even spoken at the time. And so what we can say is that the author examining this use of the trebuchet in the mid-12th to mid-15th century, and we start to get into the historical context of the work. So I said this was hugely tumultuous in the regions of Europe and the Near East, and in China, and a lot of places around the world. We're kind of going through these churns and changes, but we do know that Europe and the Middle East was a little bit more going through churns and changes. I'm not going to give you all the answers here because a lot of them are going to overlap with what you should be doing, and that's where I want your historical imagination to come out. So the next piece is the short-term, long-term trends revolving around massive buildup of armament. So the trends that were going on at the time, short-term and long-term. And this might take a little bit of outside research. This might take a little bit of diving into the details. The expectation is not for you to know all these short-term and long-term trends, but at least get at them as an important aspect of your interrogation of sources. And then finally, drawing conclusions about the event or perspective based on the broader context. And so this part here is where you basically get to kind of speak for yourself as a historian. You draw your own conclusions, and this is more an opinion that is based in fact. So moving on down, we have the aspect of continuity and change. So based on what you've seen with this particular time period, what has remained constant? I would say that the fact that the constant here is that the buildup of arms and armaments to conquer or defend territory goes on to this day, and it has gone on throughout most areas of human history that we are aware of. And so in terms of continuity, this is just a part of that long-term trend, long-term change. But wherein it says change, it says this pattern has continued to deal with humans. Changes developed in technologies, structures, design process. And this is where, going back to the source, we're looking at things like making the argument that a master engineer is likely to design the engine. And so it was kind of a top-down hierarchy of how it was done. And reading through this, you can see that, we have building techniques of the joinery. We can see pieces of the writing that actually bring out specifics about where where the context was here. So it's important to keep going back to the document whenever we can. Otherwise, we'll get kind of hung up on going off to, I want to say getting away from the document is not interrogating the sources, but it is good imaginative historical thinking. Next piece is describe the importance of these patterns. Like, who cares? What matters? Why does it matter? The importance of these patterns that you've identified. And then finally, explain how these patterns relate to a broader historical context. How do they fit in to shape and define our world? I mean, the big picture here is we are trying to decide and figure out how our world is shaped and how our world is designed. And so that's another important aspect, is for you to decide how this works. Alright, so just a quick jump over here onto the go back and give yourself a feedback and a guessed score based on the criteria. So for this part, I want you to actually look through and say response is clearly written, precise and concise. Alright, so what's that mean? Well, I defined it right down here. Written with clarity. Can you go through and read it and understand it in just one fell swoop? If that's the case, then good. If you have to go back and reread it because of sentence structure or word choice, it's probably not very clear. Written with precision. It draws on very specific details to illuminate exactly what you mean. It's accurate and unambiguous. We're not talking about vague generalities here. We don't want to take our paper and be able to apply it to another paper. We want to have this one be specific enough to our analysis that there's no chance that it's something else. This is where speaking with precision is incredibly important. And then writing concisely. Uses no more words than are needed to convey your thoughts and meaning. So the combination of precision and concision, writing precisely and concisely, are very important, because this is how you convey clear thoughts rapidly. So you have the rubric right up here that you can see. You can see the rubric right up here, and I just need you to read through this and make sure that what you do lines up with it, or give yourself an accurate grade. And then down here you have the rubric for historical thinking. Is it complete? Is it well-reasoned? And is it imaginative? And I have the complete responses right here. I have the well-reasoned responses right here. And I have the imaginative right here. So, did you respond to all the aspects of the question? And that is a rabbit hole to go down. Complete responses on this are actually very long and very in-depth. Well-reasoned. Is it uses arguments and explanations that are logical and they align with your response? This is where your historical reasoning comes in. Does one thing naturally lead to the next? And finally, the imaginative. We'll get into this later, the historical empathy, the critical thinking, and the historical imagination in more videos. But is your responses and are your answers not completely obvious? Did you have to actually take some steps and think through this from another person's perspective? So all you do is you go through and you give yourself a little bit of feedback here. And I only gave myself one example here. I gave myself a 3 on my writing because I thought it was pretty good. But what I was lacking here in my writing, let's see, actually, yeah. I didn't think it was as precise as it needed to be for my writing. So I said it was clear and it was concise, but it wasn't precise. And then for my historical thinking, I only gave myself a 2. It really wasn't very imaginative, and also it wasn't very complete. It didn't get at all the aspects. All right, glows. I provided you with an example. That's what I set out to do. Grows. As a history teacher, gotta say, a little disappointed in myself, and I think I could have done a lot more to illuminate my thinking. So, thanks for taking a look at the video. I hope it's helpful to understand the context of what we're doing, and I hope you can see that taking very careful steps along the way will make your history something that is relevant and can be shared and people can build off of, because the worst thing we can do is create some sloppy history, because that's just going to lead to more sloppy history down the line, and that's something we can't. So, alright, well, good luck, and smash that like button down below.